Hey, everybody, we're recording, we're live, we're back with the Contrarians. This is a cool Patreon episode. What we're doing, if you ever want to join these discussions, our live Zoom chats, just join us over at Patreon. I'm trying to do these things way more regularly. I'm trying to get bonus episodes with anybody who's on Patreon. Send me a message and we'll try to set something up. If you want to do something one-on-one or anything cool like that, let me know in the messages. Other than that, our topic that was voted on for today is Live Love, top 3 live albums. So top 3 of your favorite or best live albums. So it's kind of up to you how you kind of come up with your criteria. Could just be albums that mean something to you, could be what you think is the best live records. But what we're going to kind of do is we're going to go through each person and each person can pick their top 3 records. So I'm going to throw it over to Bicycle Legs to start us off. So what are your top 3 live records?
Thank you. Well, the 3 I've picked aren't necessarily my 3 absolute favorite live albums, but they're 3 that I think are really interesting for what they do. The first one I picked is Billy Joel's Songs in the Attic. Cool. And the reason I picked that album is because rather than going for the big hits on this album, he goes for like early album deep cuts. And on his early albums, he didn't get to record with his touring band. He had to record with session musicians. So he wanted to redo those songs live in concert with his touring band. And every song on there, except one, I think, is the definitive version of that song. And that's why I think that album's really cool, because it's all, you know, there's no Piano Man on it. There's none of the big hits that he'd had up to that time. It's all fairly obscure stuff that he's redone and done much better than he did on the original albums. The second album I've picked has a bit of a similarity to that. It's Midnight Oil, Screamin' Blue. Now, Midnight Oil are a band that I've been lucky enough to see live in their prime. And they're a great hard rocking band, but when they're in the studio, they're very disciplined, almost too disciplined. And when you hear the live versions of these songs, they're just a little bit looser. They're not sloppy. They're just a little bit looser, maybe a touch faster, not hugely. But it makes all the difference in the world. And they end up being the songs on it are so much better live than they are in the studio. And they're great in the studio, don't get me wrong. I love Midnight Oil. I think their early stuff in particular is just really good. But they are definitely a live act. You need to hear them live. You need to see them live. And I think, yeah, as I said, again, every song on there is the definitive version of that song.
I heard Blue Sky Mining in my local grocery store 2 days ago.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
And then the last album is one that I think other people here are definitely going to have picked. I picked this because it's unusual for me in that it's a live album where it's my favorite album by this band. And that is Live After Death, Iron Maiden. I love all the albums that come before this, the studio albums, and I love like Somewhere in Time and Seventh Son, really good studio albums. But for me, this is the primo Maiden. I love this album so much. I think, again, the versions of the songs on this album are probably the definitive versions of most of these songs. So that's the 3 that I've picked for today.
Nice. Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. You're setting the bar high already at the first one. I'm going to throw it over to Ryan, who's a new Patreon member. So this is your first time on. So take it away, Ryan.
Hi, guys. How's it going? It was so hard to find 3 choices for this week. I'll be honest, I'm not like a huge live album person. There's a bunch that I really like, but a lot of bands I prefer to hear their studio stuff because of the production and everything. But the albums that I chose today are ones that I do think kind of transcend the studio careers of the bands. I have my top 3, and then there is a 4th one that I don't know if we should mention now or at the end. But I do have a top 3, and for my first one, I'm gonna go with Space Ritual by Hawkwind.
Yeah.
This album is so cool, from the cover to the back cover to the complete fold out gatefold, which is just absolutely stunning. I'm not even gonna try to do it all right now. It's too much work. But just so many good tracks on there, and I think a lot of them are better versions than in the studio. Like, for as much as I love the album Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti Do, I think the versions of like Brainstorm and We Leave This World Today, or whatever that song's called, and other songs like Master of the Universe from In Search from Space, I think it's just so heavy on this album. And they're kind of like a band that I consider more metal than metal at times. Like, I kind of put King Crimson in the same type of realm, where like they're not quite a metal band, but they're so heavy at times. And this album, you get that more than ever. There's so much distortion, crazy guitar, crazy drums, and some really cool, like, weird spoken word poetry and stuff. Like, it's an album that really takes you on an experience rather than just being a greatest hits but crappy production. Like, there's so much more to it, and that's why I love it. For my number 2, and it could be my number 1, but my number 1's very sentimental. I'm gonna go with Made in Japan by Deep Purple. I was doing a lot of research for this whole episode, re-listening to a lot of albums, and I think one of the most potent ones for me emotional was this one. It's just so good. The thing about this album is that I'm not even that crazy about the lineup of songs on it. Like, you have classics like Highway Star, Child in Time, Smoke on the Water, Space Truckin', The Mule, but like, I'm honestly not a huge fan of Lazy. Like, I think it's a good song, but it's kind of like that like bluesy boogie stuff, and it's cool, but it's just like, I could think of so many cooler songs by Deep Purple to put on this from In Rock, like Bloodsucker or Living Wreck or something like that. But with that being said, all the versions on here of these songs are absolutely amazing. They're just like crazy long jams, amazing keyboard playing by John Lord, awesome drumming, awesome guitar by Richie Blackmore. And Ian's just on top of his game with this. Like, I've heard vocal performances of his where he was a little off in that era, but in this one he just goes crazy. I mean, his screams and Child in Time just give me chills, and same with Space Truckin', just so cool. It's just one of those albums that took, I'd say, all the songs on here and made them so much better than they were in the studio. And it's also such a loud album too. Like, I was playing it in the car today, on my way to a record store, actually. I was just like, God, this is so loud. And I was just very happy to listen to it again. And number 1's a very sentimental pick for me. It's UFO Strangers in the Night. I'd say without this album, I wouldn't be on a show like this. I wouldn't be into a lot of the bands that I'm into now. This album and this band as a whole just made me realize there's so many better bands out there than like what you hear every day on the classic rock radio. And like, I'll stand by UFO till the end of time. I mean, this is another album where I'd say everything except for one song is better than their studio versions. The one that I don't think is better in the studio is Love to Love, just because the production on the studio version is absolutely amazing. And it's just more of an experience in this one. I think Shanker's guitar solo is better in the studio too. But you've got like Out in the Street on here, Let It Roll, Lights Out, what else? Doctor, so many great This Kids, which is probably my favorite version of any of the songs on here, because that jam in the middle is just fantastic. It's sad that this was the last album that Shanker did with the band for about 20 years, and I don't think they ever recaptured that same magic again after this with him. But the chemistry was there for this album. It's so good. Even though it's a double, it doesn't feel long to me at all. I've heard it so many times, and I'll never stop loving it. So that's my number 1. And are we doing a fourth right now, just like real quick?
Yeah,
without-
just a quick
Yeah.
mention. Sure.
Throw it
All
out
right.
there, sure.
For my number 4, I'm gonna go with "Speak of the Devil" by Ozzy Osbourne. I think this is his best live album. I think it might be better than any of the albums he did live with Black Sabbath too, which amazing performances by Brad Gillis. He just kills it on this album, and Rudy and Tommy sound really good too. Ozzy sounds good on vocals. This version of "Snowblind" on here is my favorite of all time of that song, and I could say the same for a couple of others on here, but I won't go too into depth. But amazing album.
Cool. Excellent.
Cool. Thanks
Nice
a lot, Ryan.
choices. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that is an amazing album, even though at that stage in his career, Ozzy should barely have been able to stand up, let alone sing.
Yeah.
We've been saying that for 40 years.
Yeah. Nice debut, Ryan. Awesome. Good
Yeah,
picks. I'm gonna throw it over to Brett.
Awesome. So my first record I have is Metallica live in Seattle, 1989 on the Damaged Justice tour. This performance was originally released as a video, a part of the original Binge and Purge box set 93, but it actually wasn't officially released in audio form until 2018 when they did the anniversary edition of And Justice for All. But this is by far my favorite live Metallica performance of all time. At this point in their career, I felt like they were just absolutely untouchable in the sense of like just the workmanship that they put into their performance. And obviously it'd only be like maybe 2 or 3 years later, they'd be one of the biggest heavy metal bands in the world. But the intensity and energy that they have in that performance is absolutely unbelievable. So yeah, that's my first one. My second one is Pink Floyd, Is There Anybody Out There? That was recorded in 1980 and 1981. They did 2 shows at Earl's Court in London, but once again, it wasn't released until like 2000, I believe. It was the 20th anniversary of the album. But this is one of those rare instances where I listened to the live version more than I listened to the studio version. And The Wall is one of my favorite albums of all time. But I really like the fact that it was, you had songs that they had added, like What Shall We Do Now and The Last Few Bricks. And there was a couple of other things that they had added that I felt gave the album an overall better listening experience. It added to it. And then obviously, Roger Waters re-released it 2 more times, the Berlin one, and then the one in 2015, I think it was, that one is great too. But, we were talking about, unauthenticity prior with, Alive 3, and that album kind of falls in that category. And my last one is actually, it's a Maiden pick. It's Beast Over Hammersmith from 1984. This was actually recorded, by this point, Bruce was in the band for maybe 6 months, and they recorded this show 2 days before the album Number of the Beast even dropped. So they're just, they're firing on all cylinders and they sound great. But the one reason why I like this album the most is because I really enjoy the first 2 Iron Maiden albums. I love the metal, but also the punk rock aesthetic that it has to it. Some of the first bands I was in were punk bands, and as a vocalist, not being a really good one, I kind of looked up to Paul Diano. But at the same time, I just love hearing Bruce sing those Paul Diano tracks, because there are some that, like, as much as I love those versions, there's some where he sings them and it just sounds so much better. And then
Don't tell Steve Harris that you hear punk rock in those albums.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, those are my 3. And then just for an honorable mention, I went with Queensryche Operation Life Crime.
Nice.
Sweet. Good
Excellent.
pick, Brett. Thanks a lot, Brett.
Great
Thank you.
variety so far. A lot of variety. Yeah. It's
I
good
don't
to
know if
hear.
you'll see many overlapping ones, but we'll throw it over to Jamie. I'm dying to see what you picked.
Well, you guys aren't going to like any of my picks. Number 3, I actually saw this movie. I watched the movie more than I listened to the record. Last Waltz with the band.
Great. That was a great choice.
Here's the DVD I have. I love this song. I've seen this movie more than Star Wars, and I've seen Star Wars a lot. I have lines memorized, like the dialogue between the songs. There's a lot of songs on here too that are my go-to versions, like Bob Dylan. I know there's probably not a lot of Bob Dylan fans here, but
I am.
version of, what the hell is it? See, this is what happens when you don't make notes. Well, let's talk about Up on Cripple Creek. Great song. This is a songwriter's album. There is great musicianship, but it's mostly a songwriter's album when you have like Neil Diamond on there, which seems weird, but Robbie Robinson produced his album Beautiful Noise like a year beforehand, so then it doesn't seem so weird. And you've got the version of, hold on, you got, Dry Your Eyes is the Neil Diamond song. Caravan by Van Morrison. I don't know if it was a cocaine that night, but my God, you'll never hear Van Morrison more energetic in your life, especially if you watch the movie where he's kicking into the audience. You're like, this is Van the Man? Van the Man is more like Van the Man, but this is Van the Man. And you've got Forever Young and Baby Let Me Follow You Down is Bob Dylan songs on here that are fantastic. They rock. If you want to hear Bob Dylan rock, he doesn't always rock. Listen to his songs on the Last Waltz. Number 2 is Martin's favorite.
Oh,
I bullet Bob Seger. Barroom Boogie.
not a fan. Not a fan.
I know you're not a fan, but I was listening to this right before we started this show, and my God, I cannot sit still when this is on. Even the slow songs like Jody Girl and Turn the Page, I find a way to move. I have been in bad moods sitting here on Saturdays with my cats, having a beer, going, how do I get in a good mood? Put this on, and 50 minutes later, I am in a great mood. Some days it is my number 1. This is a perfect example of musicianship, songwriting, and energy coming together to create a great live album. And I would say Traveling Man and Loser is one of the best live tracks of all time.
Songwriting, Jamie, really? Songwriting?
Traveling Man, Beautiful Loser. Oh my God. And Turn the Page, that's my karaoke song. I don't even need the little screen with the dot going over the words for it. And I like it when they play a karaoke, the Bob Seger type music, and then I do the Metallica type vocals over it. But yeah, Traveling Man, Beautiful Loser. It's like a jam session, but it's not improvised. It's kind of rehearsed. So that it makes it tight, but kind of loose at the same time. Best live track of all time. There you go. Especially that was ever played on the radio. And my number 1, a lot of you guys probably never heard. Elton John, live in Australia with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. Nice. If you think Elton John is just pop songs, listen to this. This album changed my life. And I wish it was on HBO originally. I actually didn't have HBO when it came out in 1987 when it debuted, and they would play it like 3 times a day. I didn't have HBO, but I could watch it with the squiggly lines. Remember when it was scrambled, but you could hear it, and you like watch rated R movies at night and try to see a boob in the squiggly lines? Well, when this came on, I used to sit there in front of my cheap little TV that we had growing up and listen to this whole concert over and over without seeing it, except for the squiggly line. I did not know at the time. I knew I'm Still Standing and all that stuff, and I knew some of the older things from the 70s. I didn't know that he made songs like 60 Years On, I Need You to Turn To, The King Must Die. King Must Die, that sounds like something Yes would write. Take Me to the Pilot, Have Mercy on the Criminal. These are powerful songs, let alone with an orchestra. It doesn't always work when the band has an orchestra behind them, but this works perfectly. I always say the Bob Seger album makes me move. This moves me. And I wish they would release it on a real DVD. I have this cheap bootleg DVD, and it looks like a bad VHS copy, even though it's on DVD. And I don't understand why it just can't be officially released, because it was on HBO. So somewhere it's clear, and it just needs to be transferred to a DVD or Blu-ray. Don't know. But there you go.
Nice. Very cool.
Thanks, Jamie. Joe, you're next on my list.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. I have 5 live albums that are always in my rotation, but I'm gonna name my top 3 and then throw out the last 2 as honorable mentions. The first album, as Jamie said, this album literally changed my life. I had a pretty rough childhood, and before this album came out, you know, I would buy an album here and there. There you go. And you know, and I like the harder stuff. I like BTO, Sweet, you know. But when I heard Rock and Roll All Night, I had to go to the record store and buy this album. And I put it on, and first of all, I saw the album cover, just blew my mind. And then the letters inside and the pictures, I'm like, what am I looking at? And I think I listened to the first side for like a month before I got to the second side. But I mean, you hear, it leads off with Deuce, and you hear Parasite when you get deeper into the album, and 100,000 Years. And it changed my life. And first time I met Gene and Paul, I actually thanked them. They were super nice, especially Gene. And he talked to me for several minutes. And yeah, it just, because of them, I'm here. Because of this album. It's perfect. I still listen to it. My second album also changed my life. In the late 70s, I remember there was a Circus magazine that came out asking if heavy metal was dead. And a lot of my bands, Kiss, Aerosmith, Ted Nugent, you know, Boston was on the cover. Everybody besides Van Halen was kind of on the outs, and radio was more new wave. But I'm listening to the radio late at night. It was The Loop in Chicago, WLUP. And they had a guy, I don't know, it was like around midnight, and he played Motorhead. It was Jailbait, actually. And I was like, holy crap, this band is amazing. So I bought Ace of Spades. Now, that was their first domestic release in the United States. So their second domestic release was No Sleep Till Hammersmith. And this energized my love for hard rock and metal and music in general. I think this album is brilliant. It is fun. It got me into their back catalog. I mean, you know, they lead off with Ace of Spades, but then they go into Stay Clean with the bass solo. And I was like, holy crap. Lemmy's introductions to the songs with his perfect dictation. It's beautiful. I love it. Before We Are the Road Crew, and they had the loudest voice in any road crew, and he yells into the mic. It's humorous. It's fun. It's just great music. The stage set with the bomber, it just re-energized my love for music. Number 3, it's on the same level as the other 2, but it didn't have the impact, but musically it's on the same level. UFO Strangers in the Night. They were huge in Chicago. I think when Martin released his UFO, or I bought Martin's UFO book, I emailed him and said, you know, in Chicago, they were on the same level as Led Zeppelin. Like they were huge, and you didn't know how big they were in other markets. And they recorded part of the album at the famous International Amphitheater, which was an incredible dump, but saw some great shows there. My cousin was at the one show they recorded at. But yeah, the songs are just beefed up, and it's just a it's perfect album as the other 2. Michael Schenker. Now they did a re-release in 1999 where they lead off with Hot and Ready, and I like that even better. Because it's like a real live. Those first 2 songs are untouched in the studio, because as with the other, like with Kiss Alive and some of these other live albums, there was a lot of fooling around in the studio. But it seems like with this re-release, with leading off Hot and Ready, and they go into Cherry, it was more of a live feel, and I really enjoyed that release even more than the original. My honorable mentions, of course, Judas Priest Unleashed in the East. I still listen to that. Again, it's just crazy good. And they did a re-release with that extra tunes. Fantastic. And this one is a dark horse, Derringer Live. Just for the fact of Beyond the Universe, I can listen to that song every day. It just blows my mind. So that's my top three with my two honorable mentions. But yeah, Kiss Alive and Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith were life-changing for me. So.
Nice. Very cool.
Thanks,
Excellent.
Joe. Todd, you're next.
Okay, so I'm going to start with my favorite one. Anybody that knows me knows this is my favorite one because I never shut up about it. But it's Supertramp Paris. And the thing about Supertramp Paris is that it's all basically all of this album, Crime of the Century, except for one song. And then the songs from the other albums are kind of take up the space in between. It came out after Breakfast in America, but there's only 3 songs from Breakfast in America on it. But the thing about Paris is that we were talking, somebody mentioned earlier about something being the definitive version, Live After Death. This is the definitive versions of these songs, in my opinion. Because one of the things that's missing from the studio versions, even though all of their albums sound really good, is that Supertramp Paris has thunder. I mean, they play heavy and loud, and the way that Rick Davies hits the keys on the grand piano. I mean, he hits them so hard, and you listen to it and you think, wow, that's I'm not used to hearing a piano like played that aggressively. I really love the album. It starts with the first song on Crime, and it ends with School, and it ends with Crime of the Century. And just the arrangements are just so good. I mean, there's bass pedals, there's all kinds of things happening that really add to it. And the guitar, there's not a lot of guitar on it at all, except for the solos. But the solos, Roger Hodgson's solos are really good. They're mixed really well, and it's been my favorite for a long time. And I always tell people who don't particularly say that that they don't care for Supertramp, but they have to listen to Paris, because that's really the best representation of the way those songs should sound, in my opinion. Number 2 is Genesis Seconds Out. After Peter Gabriel, but while Steve Hackett's still there. One of the things that I really like about this album is that Phil Collins sings a lot of the Peter Gabriel material, and he sings it really well. And in my opinion, and this is a very contrarian opinion, that's the definitive version of Supper's Ready, which is the one that's on Seconds Out, because the band sounds better, the keyboards sound better, and Phil does a really good job. And you'd think that Phil wouldn't be weird enough to sing some of the lyrics in Supper's Ready, but he's plenty weird. And one of the really cool things about that version of Supper's Ready is that they basically do a live fade out, because that song fades out. And it's really cool. They just play quieter and quieter until at the very end of it. It's not really faded out like a real fade out would be, but they attempt to do it live. And that's really interesting. I've never seen another band do that before. So my third one, I don't have a physical copy right now because I keep getting vinyl copies of it and they're always trashed, and I keep looking for a better one. But Emerson, Lake and Palmer in concert. And this is really contrarian because everybody, people will probably say, well, why didn't you pick Welcome Back, My Friends? The reason why I like In Concert is because it is recorded outside in Olympic Stadium in Montreal with an orchestra. And the orchestra just sounds really creepy cool like that. And it's just, I really like the arrangements. Apparently, it was supposed to be a double album. Keith Emerson had sequenced it as a double album. And then by the time it came out in 1977, ELP had pretty much ceased to exist. And so Atlantic just chopped it up into a single album. But I think the version of Pictures Out at Exhibition on In Concert is the best version. It's flawed. You can hear the amplifiers buzzing. You can hear parts in Pictures at an Exhibition where it sounds like the orchestra came in a little bit too early or a little bit too late. And so it's kind of rough in that respect, but emotionally, the way that song comes comes across, especially during the final parts and the Great Gates of Kiev. It's really, to me, a more moving recording than the, and I have trouble going back to the studio version of Pictures at an Exhibition, because that recording's flawed too, as far as amplifiers buzzing and stuff like that. But everybody always says, you know, that one's more immediate and more raw, but I like the one with the orchestra. So those are my 3 picks.
Nice.
Honorable mentions: Peter Gabriel Plays Live, Kiss Alive, of course, Unleashed in the East.
Nice.
That's it.
Cool. Nice job.
Sweet. Thanks,
Thanks.
Todd.
Cool.
Ben, good to have you back. You're up next.
Yeah, thanks. So my criteria for picking my favorite 3 live albums here was to go kind of a little bit outside of the typical hard rock, heavy metal Contrarians world, but I wanted to pick stuff that, you know, generated a lot of on-stage heat that I think everybody here would dig if they haven't heard these albums. So I'm just going to go in chronological order. First one here is Miles Davis, Live Evil from 1970. So this is recorded towards the end of 1970, released in 71 actually. So we're about a year or so into Miles' full electric period, where he's pretty heavily influenced by funk and rock, kind of creating fusion at the onset of that whole thing. This particular album was recorded in a really small club in DC called the Cellar Door. Apparently only held like 160 people tops for each show. And you get this atmosphere to the show where it's almost like you're sitting at the front of the stage with this band like blasting away at you, probably way too loud for the room that they're in. The particular selection of tracks on here, there's a lot of editing that goes on these albums where they've, you know, picked and chose different sections of different performances and kind of put them together into a one, you know, long track that draws on different performances. But at this point, the band is not really playing songs as much as the songs are more like riffs that they base improvisation on. So the whole kind of interest that's generated when you're listening to this is hearing like, where are they going to take this? And it's often into, you know, really kind of crazy, abrasive, distorted variations on funk and jazz. So that's number 1, Live Evil. It's got this incredible back cover, this creature on the back. Apparently the guy's face is supposed to be J. Edgar Hoover.
The wall.
All those Miles Davis albums, live albums from 1970 to 1976 are wonderful. All of them.
Yeah, they're all pretty incredible. Number 2 here. This is 1975 Magma Live. You can see that similar thing on the back. So if you don't know Magma, I was reading some reviews on this, and one person online described them as Klingon opera, which I think is a pretty accurate summation of what they sound like. So you've got basically a progressive rock band, bit of like jazz fusion and classical mixed in there. But the strange thing is this particular album, there's 1 male and 2 female singers. And all the singing is done in this made up language that the leader of the band came up with. He happens to be the drummer of the band. So it's got this real alien quality to it. The whole Klingon thing comes in too, in that it's got this kind of propulsive forward momentum to it. They generate these like kind of trance-like repetitive grooves that generate this feeling of like impending doom, or like an invading armada of spaceships coming to wipe out some planet. I think this particular album, for a lot of people, is considered one of their best, just because the recording on it is a bit better than some of their studio albums. And And you get a nice variety here. You get some real kind of heavy, intense stuff on a lot of the longer tracks, but there are a lot of nice kind of more ethereal moments as well. So Magma Live is my number 2. Number 3, also a prog rock band here. If you can't read it, it's Vandergraaf or Vandergraaf Generator. Album called Vital from 78.
Fabulous choice.
Yeah, this was the last, well, so they were called Vandergraaf Generator up to the studio album before this is just under the name Vandergraaf. They kind of reconfigured the band at that point. A little bit of a lineup switch. This is, like I said, recorded early 78, taken from a single show at a club called the Marquee in London. You can actually go on a website for the Marquee and see the full gig history of the venue. And you look at January, February 78, and the bands playing there are like Adam and the Ants, the Saints, the Police, Slaughter and the Dogs, the Jam, Wire, Ultravox. So you, at that time, you've got punk going into post-punk. So what is this prog band doing there? Well, as soon as you put this album on, it makes sense because it opens with this heavy, like grinding fuzz bass riff and these super like throttling, just like heavy grooves. I mean, the bass sounds like the guy is like shoving the neck of the bass into a food processor or something. It's one of the heaviest fuzz bass sounds I've ever heard. And Peter Hamill, the vocalist, he's got this unique style, kind of a thespian vocal style. And you can just imagine him as you listen to this, like spit flying out of his mouth. He's just sounds like he's totally possessed in the moment. So it's just this super intense, heavy is kind of the wrong word, but just a intense kind of visceral primal experience listening to this album. So those are my 3 quick honorable mentions. Ryan already mentioned Space Ritual, just a great, kill some brain cells kind of album. He'll throw in Dr. Feelgood, Stupidity, UK pub rock from 75. Awesome rhythm guitar or guitarist named Wilco Johnson on this album. Just straight ahead kind of bluesy rock. And on that tip to this Jay Giles album released in 72. I don't know if it was recorded same year, called Full House. Another just kind of straight ahead rock and roll, high energy album, single disc album. So those are my picks.
Nice.
Sweet.
Wow.
Thanks, Ben.
We ought to make a
sorry.
big list of all these, Marco, and put it in the thing, so people can see like the great variety and width and breadth of everything that's being taught.
Even my Bob Seger?
Yeah, even that.
Even your
We can
Bob
put
Seger.
that in. We'll put a little asterisk by it.
Okay.
Very cool. Reed, you're up next.
Okay, so I've been into live albums literally as long as I've been listening to albums at all. I started listening to music as a thing in 1977. I had a friend whose parents had a store that sold records, and he had everything you can imagine. And his favorite band was Kiss. And the thing that I learned from Kiss in 1977 was that I thought their studio albums sounded horrible and their live albums sounded great. And that gave me a lifelong love of live music. So in the 70s, I think that live albums generally sound better than the studio albums. By the 80s, it was about equal to where live albums were more just like a greatest hits kind of thing. And then you get into the 90s, and by then, I think bands unquestionably sound better in the studio than they do on live albums. And I gave up on live albums for years and years. And now that I'm older, I have a few health problems. It's hard to get out to shows, and I'm really back into live albums again because they give me a concert experience. So I picked my albums for some specific kind of nostalgia reasons. These aren't in any particular order, but I'm going to start off with, you can see this Rob Rock The Voice of Melodic Metal live in Atlanta. This was recorded at one of the Prog Power festivals in Atlanta, which I think are still going on. I went to those for several years. And I love this album because I was there when it was recorded. It's the only album that I was in the audience for a recording, and that makes it very special. Sadly, I don't think it's a phenomenal live album. The band is good. Rob is an amazing singer. If you're not familiar with Rob Rock, he's possibly best known as the singer for Impolitary, not really sure how to say his name, sorry. And he's kind of off in that Christian metal ghetto, but he has some fantastic solo albums. He's recorded with Gus G and Roy Z, and Jakey Lee actually played on some of his albums. And his band on the show here included a man named Carl Johan Grimmark, who's the lead guitarist in Narnia, and he is a shredder. So they were a fantastic band, and Rob is an amazing singer, but he doesn't have much stage presence. He's not a real exciting guy. And the guy that put on the festival opens the show, and it's the most laconic kind of matter of fact. He's like, hey, we've got a live show taping tonight and you guys are a part of it. It just kills the excitement right off the bat. It's crazy. But it doesn't matter because I was there and I love it for that. Also, if you've never heard Rob Rock, check out First Winds from the End of Time. It's a song he did with Gus G. It is fantastic. So yeah, Rob Rock deserves a little bit more love in the heavy metal community than he gets, I think. My second pick, because I will take any chance I can to mention Bjorn, I'm going with Bjorn live on Death Road. He released an album called Life on Death Road. So this is live on Death Road. Bjorn has three live albums out, one of which was actually recorded at Prog Power. And I'm still kicking myself for missing that show because I think it's the only show his band has ever done in the United States. It was available on DVD for a while. There was some kind of skullduggery involved with that. I don't know what that was, but it's been pulled from the market. Now he has these other albums. But Bjorn is a fantastic singer. What I want from a live album, it has to sound good to begin with. It has to be a good set list. And it has to give me something that I don't get just listening to the albums, right? There has to be something that makes it a live experience. And what makes this one a live experience is Bjorn always used different band members when recording his albums. So the guitarist that's on this live record is not the guys that recorded a lot of those songs. And some of these guys are real European wizards that have very, very different styles. And the guitar player he has on the live album, a man named Tore Morin, he's a fine guitarist. He's just not the same type of guitarist. And since I play guitar, you may be able to see some guitars back there over my shoulder. I build guitars as a hobby. I think it's fascinating to hear a musician adapt other people's music. But it gives you a very different experience than listening to the album because it's a different guy. And, you know, I always say, if you're not a musician, you think, well, he could just copy his licks. I'm like, well, that's like you trying to copy the way I talk. You can get pretty close, but you're not going to sound exactly like me because you're not me. It's the same thing if you play an instrument. But live on Death Road, also it's shipped with a DVD. So you get that double combination of being able to watch the show and listen to the album. I love that. And then my third one may seem like it's going to come a little bit out of left field, but I'm going with David Bowie, A Reality Tour.
Oh, fabulous.
I saw that tour.
See, and I did not. I have gone through many musical journeys in life, and I did not listen to David Bowie in around the turn of the century. I didn't start listening to David Bowie until literally 2012. So in 2003, this was his last tour. He had a heart attack on stage during one of the shows, and he never went back out on the road. So this allows me to go back and listen to what a David Bowie concert would be like, because I'll never be able to have that experience, you know, even prior to him passing away. It's a great set list. The band sounds great. I know a lot of people think Bowie's creative peak was in the 70s and his commercial peak was in the 80s, but I actually love his 90s and 2000s stuff. I love his albums with Reeves Gabrels, who's a really strange guitarist, like One Outside or Hours. I think those are great albums. He's got some really good covers, like he does Cactus. Just some really good songs. It sounds great. He plays with a band that he toured with a lot. He's got Gail Ann Dorsey playing bass and doing backup vocals. If you aren't familiar with Gail Ann Dorsey, Google that woman. She is a
awesome.
phenomenal musician.
And she does a great Freddie Mercury when they do Under Pressure.
Her voice is beautiful. She's an amazing bass player. So that whole show is just wonderful. It sounds great. And again, it gives me an experience that I'm not able to have because the man didn't tour after 2003. So I got into it too late in order to experience that, but I have the reality tour album. And he's got a whole bunch of live albums. I think since he's died, they released, a dozen live albums. I mean, they keep releasing live records for David Bowie, but this is the one that I really like the best. And then I'll just throw in a couple of real quick honorable mentions. Whoops, did I grab them? Again, one that you might expect and one not. Nevermore, The Year of the Voyager. I'm a huge Nevermore fan, and I love the fact that a band so heavy and so strange got a double live album. And if you're not familiar with Nevermore, they are really heavy for a band to be on live.
I've seen them live.
Oh, I've seen it. Well, I mean, again, dead lead singer now, but saw Nevermore many times. Love those guys. And then my left field, Johnny Marr, Adrenaline Baby, which is just, I never listened to the Smiths. I couldn't pick the Smiths out of a lineup, but for some reason, I love his solo stuff. It's just power pop. It's well constructed. He's got a fantastic voice. I also am an amateur singer. I'm drawn to singers that are kind of in my range, and he's right in my vocal range. So anyway, Adrenaline Baby, love this album.
Reed, you nailed it with the production. I feel the same way. And secondly, fun fact, I met my wife at David Bowie's Sound and Vision tour.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
Very cool list, Reed. Tim, you're up next.
Okay, one of these, there's a bit of a backstory, so I'll make the first two really quick. Maybe a controversial choice, but I talked about this when we did our Music from the Elder discussion. I got into Kiss in 1993. I wasn't a fan before then. I was certainly aware of them, but a friend of mine kept playing this album that had just come out over and over again, and I realized I liked a lot of the songs on it all along. And so I got into Kiss because of Alive 3. I still think this is a really good collection of songs. I love the lineup with Bruce and Eric Singer. I mean, they open with Creatures of the Night. They go into Deuce. I love Heaven's on Fire. And here's the first time I ever heard Watching You. And I Love It Loud was a song that I always liked by them. They do that on here. It was actually a single. So yeah, Kiss Alive 3 is the reason I got into Kiss, as funny as that may sound, but it's all about the timeline. So there's that one.
Just on you, Marco.
I would be completely remiss if I left this out. Exit Stage Left, Rush. This is my favorite of their many live albums. It documents probably my favorite period for them. And I love the album art that Hugh Syme did, where it brings together all of the elements from their previous albums on here. I don't understand why Limelight's not on here. It's on the Exit Stage Left video. That makes no sense to me. But yeah, I had to mention Exit Stage Left. So those are two. The other one is going to take a little longer to explain. Martin will know Much Music, Canada's version of MTV. In 1987, of course, I saw the video for Whitesnake, Still of the Night, and I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever, well, I love the video, but I thought the song was awesome. Then Here I Go Again comes out, and they're huge. And Much Music used to do a thing that, and I'm sure MTV had an equivalent, but they would do a daily thing called a Spotlight, which is where they would take one artist for a half an hour and just play their videos and mix in some interview clips. And I remember watching Much Music in like fall of '87 and saying that, oh, today in the Spotlight, it's going to be Whitesnake. And I remember thinking, Well, I only know of 2 Whitesnake videos. Like, Is This Love hadn't even come out yet. So I literally knew Still the Night and Here I Go Again. I'm like, well, I got to watch this and see what's on it. So in reverse order, of course, they played Here I Go Again, Still the Night, Love Ain't No Stranger, which is possibly my favorite Whitesnake song, Slow and Easy. And the whole thing started with the original 1980 video for Fool for Your Loving, which is still one of my favorite Whitesnake songs ever. And I wanted to, so the first thing I ever bought by Whitesnake was, of course, the 1987 album, the big one. And the next time I went in, I wanted to buy the album that had Fool for Your Loving on it because I really, really love that song and I couldn't find it. And what I didn't know at the time is that even though Geffen Records had reissued the Whitesnake catalog, they did not reissue Ready and Willing. I say that I've never ever seen a copy, and I think they did it on purpose because they wanted Whitesnake to re-record Fool for Your Loving. If anybody out there has a copy of Ready and Willing on Geffen Records, I'd love to see it. I've never ever seen one. I've only ever seen copies on Mirage or UK copies on EMI. But what I did find was this, Live in the Heart of the City. And it had Fool for Your Loving on it. So I bought it without any question. As soon as I saw this had that song on it. And I'd never heard any of the other songs on here. This was my introduction to the early Whitesnake. So I'd never heard Come On. I'd never heard Walking in the Shadow of the Blues, Love Hunter, Take Me With You, any of those songs. Now, this has only got 7 songs on it. Also, there's the deluxe version, which is like, well, one's live in the heart of the city, the other one's live at Hammersmith. You know, this incorporates some of the Deep Purple stuff, like Might Just Take Your Life and Mistreated. But as has been said before, I think these versions are the definitive versions of those Whitesnake songs, because the early Whitesnake albums like Snakebite and Trouble and Love Hunter, I like them, but I think the production's kind of dated and the songs seem slow to me. Like a song like Come On is a lot faster on the live album, which is typical. And I'm used to hearing it that way. So when I got the studio version, I'm like, gee, that's slow. So I wanted to mention that. That was my introduction to the early Whitesnake. So my honorable mentions are, for the same reason, I think they're the definitive versions for the most part. Sammy Hagar, All Night Long. This came out in 1978. Except for the Montrose songs. She can't improve on the songs in the first Montrose album. That production's stellar. But all these Red and Rock and Roll Weekend and Reckless and Turn Up the Music, they all sound better on this live album, which was also released in the UK, called Loud and Clear, which had a bonus of Space Station Number 5 on it. My other honorable mentions, I had to mention Y&T, Yesterday and Today Live. This was recorded at the end of 1990, just as they were about to disband for about 4 or 5 years. And my final one is Yes Shows, not Yes Songs, but Yes Shows. I really like this period of the band. So there's a lot of Going for the One on here. I wish they did more songs from Tormato. There's only Don't Feel the Whale on here, but I love the version of The Gates of Delirium. And there you go. Those are my live albums.
Nice job, Tim. Very
Awesome.
cool.
I love that
Yeah.
you use the cassette as your go-to for Live in the Heart of the City. I'm a big cassette guy.
This is the very cassette that I bought.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Much music.
Cool.
I think Power Hour was the first time I heard Tom Sawyer by Rush when I was like in grade school.
The Pepsi Power Hour. Yeah, I learned a lot about hard rock and metal from watching that. Yeah.
Good call
Very
with
cool.
Yes Shows. You know, I love Yes songs, but the production's way better on Yes Shows.
Yeah.
And you know what? Honestly, I love Rick Wakeman, but when he goes into his Catherine the Great, I go somewhere else. I just like the fact that they did songs on here.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Nick, you're next.
Thanks, Margo. When we first had our first Zoom meeting that wasn't posted on YouTube, I mentioned a band that sort of sets the bar high for me. And I mentioned their live album and a contrarian choice. I'm going to revisit them again, and that's Humble Pie. Of course, the classic is this one here, Rockin' the Fillmore. And I'll follow that up with just talking about sort of my contrarian choice, which was their live album released through the King Biscuit Flower Hour. And it's made an appearance now the last few years as something like Live in '73 or Live at Winterland. But this is the original version of it that was released years ago. And maybe I'm talking about these albums with an audience of one, because I heard a podcast where our Martin talked about how he felt that certain bands like Humble Pie and The Faces and who was it? I think Free just left them flat.
Yeah.
So maybe we're gonna try to preach to Martin. for this one. But the thing about these two albums is that they're two distinct eras of Humble Pie, but they really are within 2 years of each other as far as recording goes. Rockin' the Fillmore was recorded in 71 at the Fillmore East. Humble Pie was second on the bill. They weren't even the headliner. There were 4 shows over 2 nights. The headliner was Lee Michaels, and the opener was Fanny. So that was your triple bill. But they called the best material from those 4 performances and cobbled together Rockin' the Fillmore. And of course, a few years ago, they released basically all 4 performances on this thing right here. So for the completists, this is great. But it's a fantastic album because it shows them at the height of their powers with Peter Frampton, the band being somewhat of a super group with Frampton and Steve Marriott from Small Faces and Brett Ridley from Spooky Tooth, and Jerry Shirley, the young Jerry Shirley, who of course went on to play with Fastway and others. At the time they joined Humble Pie, he was in a band called Apostolic Intervention. But the album is regarded as a classic, and I've heard a number of live albums tonight that I know the artists themselves were influenced by Humble Pie, namely Kiss. Every member of Kiss speaks glowingly about Humble Pie. Paul Stanley gets his stage raps from, they sort of emanate from the Steve Marriott School of Stage Raps, although that Marriott wasn't the originator. He borrowed heavily from R&B and soul artists. And UFO, Phil Mogg, I heard it right from the horse's mouth. Talked to him about Steve Marriott once after a gig. Matter of fact, I think he was singing some Humble Pie things and melodies during a UFO show that I saw. Judas Priest, I've seen Halford on YouTube singing I Don't Need a Doctor, fantastic version. So I know he's influenced. There's a certain band I haven't heard tonight. I cannot believe, a certain band from Rockford, Illinois, and their live album, but I know they're heavily influenced by at least Marriott and Small Faces, and I believe Humble Pie. And there's others. Oh, I also know that Michael Lee Smith, when he's getting ready to go out and do gigs with stars, who does he listen to? Steve Marriott. That's how he gets his voice up to speed. So, and I believe I learned that from his either Facebook page or from him directly. I can't remember which, but anyway, the Rockin' the Fillmore is a classic. It's gold. Matter of fact, if you can see right there, there's my Humble Pie gold album hanging on the wall. The Contrarian, maybe that's enough for that one. The Contrarian choice is the King Biscuit album that now is out there on other things called Live 73 or Live at Winterland. I like this album because, maybe one of the shortcomings of Rockin' the Fillmore is, you have side 2 is literally one song. I Walk on Gilded Splinters is 24 minutes, so it's sort of a time investment. Rockin' the Fillmore is a double album, and there's side 3 is Rolling Stone, which is 16 minutes long. So this is more compact. It's more don't bore us, get to the chorus, but it's a different version of the band. Frampton's gone by then. We've got Dave Clemson's in the band. They've got a backing group, the Blackberries, vocalists, and they're at the height of their fame. Rockin' the Fillmore is a hit. Smokin' is a hit with 30 Days in a Hole. And the album is recorded in San Francisco, and it's just from start to finish, just chugging hard rock. If you want ballads, don't bother with this one. It's just from the first chords of Up Our Sleeves to the end of Hot and Nasty. It's just nonstop. It's like a spaceship going into atmosphere. So it's less no peaks and valleys like maybe Rockin' the Fillmore. But couple things I want to loop back to Rockin' the Fillmore, some factoids about it. And this is interesting. One, when they had the album ready, mixed, and their manager was going to hear it, he thought it sounded like, he didn't think it sounded very good, and he reminded them that part of their magic is the interplay with the audience. So he had them turn up the ambient mics that were all over the Fillmore East, and with turning up those mics, the magic occurred. The second thing is that, and this is from Peter Frampton saying it, this is a band that had electric guitars that went from their cable right into Marshalls, and that's it. There's no pedals, there's no boxes, there's no loops, there's no wireless, nothing. It's just right into that, and try to get a sound like that. I would suggest to you about 95% of bands then and now cannot do it. Third thing is no overdubs. This album is pure. I'm, and you can listen to it on this thing, but there's nothing rewritten, no songs are replayed, no songs, vocals recut, and that sort of thing. So, and that's the same thing with the King Biscuit thing. So it's a little bit more of a raw recording, if I can flip back and forth, but King Biscuit as well. No overdubs, straight, unadulterated, pure rock and roll. To keep rolling here, my third choice is an album that I still don't own. It was sort of my pandemic album. And I've heard it now streaming, and I've heard it on YouTube. My back?
Yeah.
All right. I was turned on to it by my band leader, Jim George, is a big Humble Pie fan, and he's a wealth of knowledge about Humble Pie. But I was all fired up to discover during the pandemic a live album by Sam Cooke. It was live at the Copa. And I know this is sort of not contrarian fare, but you know, we're outside, but it's still something worth discussing because it's such an electric, he's such an electric performer. And I was all thrilled and happy I found this album live at the Copa. And Jim told me, he's like, no, that was an album released during his lifetime, but you really want to listen to live at Harlem Square. I printed this out so you can take a look at it. And there's actually a second cover. This album is amazing because it came out in 1985, which was almost 21 years or so after Sam Cooke died. He was murdered in a motel or hotel in LA. And it's incredible. It was recorded in early '63, and the record company RCA Victor said, we are not putting this out. It is too raw. It is too gritty. Our man Sam is a crossover artist. We want him to be like Nat King Cole. He needs white fans as well as Afro-American fans. And they decided to shelve it. And so, you know, you have the Copa, which is nice. It's great. You know, you've got your sort of standard fare that was more appealing to the masses. But this album sat on the shelf. It's released in '85. I never knew about it until, of course, the pandemic. And it's fantastic from start to finish. You've got a guy who can sing so smooth and elegantly at the beginning of a line on his recorded stuff, his studio stuff, and then by the end of it, you know, he can get gritty and soulful. On this album, he really pushes his voice at his limits. Yeah, so you have all these hits that he wrote. He wrote all his stuff, and he's really pushing that voice. And it's the work of a guy who obviously has a gospel background, and he's pushing it, and it's gritty, it's hard, it's driving. He's got a band that's centered on King Curtis on saxophone, who's just a monster. And from start to finish, it's less than 40 minutes, but the thing just smokes from beginning to end. And so if you're into live music, you should check it out. If you've ever played in a band on any level, you should listen to it. It's how a band should sound. If you're interested in how a person should sing live with no overdubs, he's just bringing it to in a club atmosphere, to a receptive audience that just really, really ate it up. So, and I know that this album, I guess, is growing in stature. Again, I never heard it. And if you care anything about Rolling Stone, but as an example, that this album was in the top 500 several years ago, and now it's up at it was at 440 something. Now it's in the 240s, and I think it's only going to grow in stature in the future. So I just can't say enough about that album. It was a great find during the pandemic. Honorable mentions quickly. This one discovered when I was a little kid through my grandparents. Johnny Cash. You know, if you want to perform before a great audience, I guess Prisoners are the way to go. But the Folsom Prison, just a fantastic album, and it still has a certain electricity that you don't find, and it's that give and take in an audience, but it holds up, and it's great. So that would be my honorable mention. Oh, and by the way, nice. I would also throw in there, I don't know them well enough yet, but any of the Jay Giles live albums are fantastic. And the one that Ben highlighted that just smokes. So Jay Giles, ask me in a year or two, and Jay Giles would be probably any of those albums would be high on my list.
Nice.
Cool. Thank you, Nick. And Matt, always good to see you, Matt. Take it away.
Good to see everybody. Love all the picks. So my first choice, my number one, is going to be the Kinks, One for the Road. So if you're a serious music fan or rock critic, you're supposed to love the 60s Kinks. You're supposed to love the Wes Anderson soundtrack Kinks, and you're supposed to kind of look down on the arena rock Kinks. And I do love all the 60s stuff, but I love arena rock Kinks. They were my first concert. I got to see them in the early 80s several times, and they always were amazing. And it was like what I hear on this record. Ray Davies gets, I think, a lot of lyrical credit. People appreciate that he kind of takes on a persona in his songs. He's acting in a way of these songs. And here he's performing the role of a rock star. He's like Mick Jagger. He's got a lot of the moves like Jagger. He's really energetic and putting everything through. So even though there's part of me that thinks he's acting, I'm totally bought in, right? Like he's a great actor then. I'm totally bought into it. The songs, it's much more rocking than anything that they had really released up to that point. They were supporting the low budget album, which is a pretty rocking album. It's a little bit punkish. The guitar sounds for Dave Davies is very, got a great Les Paul type, distorted rock sound to it. He plays really good solos. He's got an extended solo intro to Celluloid Heroes, which is fantastic. And then for the older material that they did, they took some, a little bit lesser known songs and performed them in just this great rockin' way. So things like Hard Way or David Watts, they're kind of reinvented. And again, it's really like being there at the shows. It's got the fake start to Lola, which they would always do in concert, right? And, the Deos and everything like that in between. So really captured the experience of seeing the Kinks at that time period. That's my number one. My number two, second choice is Blackfoot, Highway Song live. I had to get this as an import. I don't know that it was released in the US. Came out in '82. Blackfoot had a reputation of being giant killers, right? As a band, you didn't want opening up for you. And the audience is, the way it's mixed, I guess, they're very loud and seem very supportive in a way that probably American fans weren't. It's recorded in the UK. And, Blackfoot, tremendous live band. I know, Martin, you're not as into the Strikes sort of Highway Song and Train, but seeing Blackfoot live, it felt like they were always building up to those two songs the way Skinner builds up to Sweet Home Alabama and then Freebird. Yeah. And they delivered in that order on the record. And I think that really works. And I think live, they really were, just sort of those staple songs for them. I got to see an older version of Blackfoot later. Ricky Medlock is just a tremendous frontman. Wish he got to do more in Skinnerd than he gets to do. Even later on, I saw sort of the not great version of Blackfoot that had that album where he completely replaced all the members. That's not a good album, but I saw them touring that album at the Living Room in Providence, which is a tiny club. And I got there early. I was in the front, and Ricky Medlock just rocked so hard for the whole show. I thought he was playing in front of a ton of people. At the end of the show, I turned around. There wasn't many people there, but he played like there, it was a huge crowd, and it was really tremendous. So I think that comes across in this live album.
Was that when he did Saturday Night?
Yeah, it is, and he played that live, and it was kind of better. They actually had a pretty cool shtick for how they delivered that, where he had different band members singing, and when the drummer sang, he ducked down and shook his head so you could see the drummer and stuff. But so anyways, always love seeing Blackfoot live. And then my number three choice, I have this on cassette, so I don't know if this is going to show up well or not. This is Praying Mantis with Paul Diano and Dennis Stratton. So like Brett, I was a big fan of the first two Maiden albums. And I would always sort of, after he left, try to follow his career for the 80s and I guess into the early 90s. I stuck with him. And that journey was not always very satisfying. So this Diano album is not good. Battle Zone was a little bit better. But this was really the only thing that I picked up that really still did it for me. I was only familiar with Praying Mantis from the Metal for Mothers song that they had on There Was a Captured City. That was the only thing I had heard from them at that time. Paul Diano joins about halfway through. Dennis Stratton, I think, is on all of it. The versions of the Praying Mantis songs, which is mostly what they perform on there, when I later went back and heard was a Time Tells No Tales, which is what most of those songs came from. These are much more rocking versions. I like them a lot better than what were on those studio albums. You get some Maiden covers in there. They're all done very well. Paul Diano still sounds good at this point. It's right before he kind of goes all Pantera, and I don't know, his voice kind of loses it shortly thereafter. But it's very cool. And I enjoyed that one. And then my honorable mention is Pain of Salvation 12/5. And the only reason this is a honorable mention only is because I couldn't find my CD, so I have no prop for this one. It's a unplugged record. Pain of Salvation is a great live band. Reed, I saw them play at Prog Power as well, so I always love the Prog Power shows. So this is an unplugged one, and unlike other live albums, period, they completely reinvent the songs that they do. So if you're not familiar with them, I guess they're a prog metal band, prog hard rock band. They kind of transcend categories. To me, they're the most important, interesting, progressive band of the last 25 years. Just a really fascinating, great lyrics, great musicianship. And so it came out in, I think, 2004. It's got all the songs from their early material, which is great material, but completely reinvented. They're tied together thematically. Songs from disparate albums are tied together. They do this, basically the song Ashes, which is the original version. It's in a minor key. It's very, very moving. And instead they change the key into a major key, and it's almost uplifting. And it like changes the meaning of the song. It's unbelievable. So if you're not familiar with Pain of Salvation, check them out anyways. But that 12/5 one, really interesting listen.
Nice.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you. All right, Martin, take it away.
All right. So I'm not a huge live album guy. I've always kind of said that. I definitely don't like the long jams. So I hate Your Song Remains the Same and Rainbow on Stage and records like that. So my three all have a theme of being anti-live albums in certain ways. The first one I'm going to go with is the least in that direction. The Pat Travers Go For What You Know live album. The only reason I like this as someone who doesn't like live albums, it's only a single album and it's got 8 songs on it. That's what I want to have happen. I don't like Boom Boom Out Goes the Lights kind of in any version, but everything else on here really accents the rhythm section of Mars Cowling and Tommy Aldridge. The rhythms are amazing on here. This is, Pat Travers, the funk metal guy, the funk rock guy. You hear that all over, like Hooked on Music, Getting Better, Go All Night, definitely, like Smokin' version of that on here. Makes No Difference, Heat in the Street. So 2 of his heaviest songs are on here, as well as Making Magic. So it's just bang, bang, bang. Stevie's a little bit of a mellow one, but everybody, a lot of people, when you talk about the best album by a certain band, a lot of fans will actually pick this as the greatest Pat Travers album. So that's a little bit of an anti. Another one that's a little bit of an anti-live album is Kiss Alive 2, and everybody can guess the reason why I'm calling this an anti-live album. Yes, it's because it's got a whole side of studio songs on it, right? Which are amazing songs. So All American Man is one of Kiss's greatest songs, as is Rocket Ride, right? And the rest, kind of pan out to make a Love Gun, Rock and Roll Over kind of album. But the other reason I love this one is this is the second biggest concert I ever went to. I saw this tour in Montreal with Cheap Trick backing up. I'm not from there. I'm from way on the other side of the country, but we were on a family vacation and they happened to be playing, and we saw Kiss in a big Coliseum in Montreal. So, and there's your signed by, I think it's Ace and Paul. Why would I have Paul on this? No, that can't be Paul. I think it's Peter Criss, Ace and Peter on there. So yeah, cool. Yeah. And I love the fact that all the songs on here are from post Kiss Alive, so they do that good value thing where everything is from the last big celebrated albums, which would be your Rock and Roll Over, your Love Gun, and and Your Destroyer. And then the final one, which is even more anti-live, I did a whole episode of History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff on live albums of original material that aren't on other albums. So that gives you more value of a live album. So I picked MC5, Kick Out the Jams, which most people consider the greatest MC5 album. I don't know, because I like live albums so little, I almost like Back in the USA and High Time more. But this is heavy and heavy for its day. So I think it comes out at the very, very beginning of 69, but it's recorded in late 68, Grandee Ballroom. Although I always thought that, you know, with these shots, you get it in your mind, like the Pat Travers of the back of Van Halen Diver Down or Foghat Live, about the sun-dappled outdoor gig with 100,000 people in one, you know, the big house or something, right? I've always looked at this and I've always pictured this being played live outside. No, it wasn't. It was played in the pretty grand but still goofy Grandee Ballroom. And the very cool thing about my copy of this is it's signed by 3 of the MC5 guys inside, right? So there's your guys there.
But
so
is it the Mother Effers version or the Brothers and Sisters?
Brothers and Sisters, I believe. And it's a French Electra one. All my MC5s I always ever got were French Electra for some reason. Those are the ones that were distributed well. And then my honorable mentions, I went with Black Sabbath Live Evil. I thought that was a really good, monstrous recording on that. And I went with the Sister album, which Ryan mentioned smartly. This is so well done. Great rhythm section, Rudy Sarzo, Tommy Aldridge, and Kiss Alive. I was going to pick this, but it's been talked about a little bit. And then Ted Nugent, Double Live Gonzo. So there you go.
Very cool.
That's my number 5.
Cool.
All right.
I love the fact we got all 3 of the Kiss Alive albums.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. We didn't do Kiss Alive 4 with the symphony, but
No, I don't think that'll make
Is
it.
that Alive 4 or is the Millennium album Alive 4? They were both
I don't know.
advertised that. That's
Yeah.
kind of confusing.
Interesting,
Neither of them
yeah.
are that special.
Yeah.
I'll
Marco, I guess it's you. You're up now, eh?
I'll go really quick.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna do 5. So not in any particular order. So just say I have 2 honorable mentions. You can pick which ones are honorable mentions.
Okay.
Elvis Aloha from Hawaii. I can listen to that anytime. I could, have a cigar, lay on the beach and listen to that all day. Love it. Groundhogs Live at Leeds 71. That was a record that my cousin gave me a long time ago. And it really opened my eyes to, like, there's a lot of bands out there that I don't want to call them obscure because they might be obscure in North America, but there's a lot of bands out there that don't have big names that are really good. And I went and got their first 5 albums right away. Kiss Alive 3. Actually, I was joking about it earlier, but that was on my list because that was the first Kiss record, first record I ever bought with my own money. Walked into a record store and bought that. I had Kiss Meets the Phantom on VHS. I was already aware of Kiss, like Kiss Animalized Live, like the videos, Kiss Exposed, stuff like that. But I was about 8 or 9, and I actually walked into a record store and bought Kiss Alive 3. And I at the time, I absolutely loved that record. Iggy Pop Live in Paris 77. I think I bought it for like $1, and that was I'd had that before I ever heard the Stooges or Iggy Pop or anything like that, and that was probably the farthest I ever stretched $1 was Iggy Pop Live in Paris 77. And Scorpions Worldwide Live, because I think I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I picked it up at my grandmother's house, and I think it was my uncle's record, and it was a double live vinyl. I remember picking it up and looking at it and being like, what the hell is this? I remember opening it up and seeing that picture of the heads just going far out in the distance into the into the view. And that was probably the most significant impact, like an image, the first impact an image of music made on my life was probably that image, that I was like, what is this? It just totally confused me and blew me away and everything. And the fact that it was a vinyl and I was a kid and I didn't know what vinyl was. So those are, I did 5, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are my 5.
It's amazing, the variety. This has been really cool. But yeah, thanks guys for doing this, and thanks for being Patreons as well. I mean, and when you guys do this, I mean, these shows get better numbers than I think the viewers like you guys better. They like Marco and me. So so that's really cool because you're all really smart and you got really cool trivia to go with all these things. So it's
Hey Marco, can I do one honorable mention?
One real quick.
And it's Contrarian. I like this better than this.
Oh no. Yeah.
Sleep on that tonight, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thanks, Jamie.
Everybody remember
Yeah.
too, we have a panel discussion coming up on Tuesday, I think won the poll, Tuesday at 7 p.m. on Queen Hot Space. So that'll be really cool. If you want to join our conversations, join us over at Patreon because we're going to continue to do this. And other than that, thanks everybody for stopping by and we'll catch you next time. Thanks
Wicked.
everyone.
Thanks,
Later.
guys. Talk
Thanks,
to you
Margo.
later.
Everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
See ya.